Chapter 4 Quasimodo. In the twinkling of an eye, everything was ready to carry out Coppenol's idea. Townspeople, students and clerks all set to work. The chapel opposite the marble table was chosen for the scene of the election. The glass was knocked out of the small round window over the door, and it was agreed that the candidates were to put their heads through it, standing on two barrels placed one on top of the other. Each candidate, man or woman, for it was also permissible to elect a popess, was to keep his face covered and remain hidden in the chapel until it was time for him to make his appearance. In no time at all, the chapel was filled with candidates and the door was closed behind them. From his seat in the gallery, Coppenol directed and supervised everything. During the uproar, the cardinal, no less disconcerted than Gringoire, withdrew along with his staff on the pretext of urgent business. The crowd, who had been so excited by his arrival, paid hardly any attention to his departure. The first face which appeared at the window, with its red eyes, gaping mouth, and wrinkled forehead, brought forth such indistinguishable laughter that Homer would have taken those simple townspeople for immortal gods. A second face appeared, and a third, and another, and another. And each time the laughter and joyous excitement redoubled. The crowd was seized with a kind of frenzied intoxication and fascination which is difficult to conceive of in our own day. Imagine a series of faces successively representing all geometrical forms, from the triangle to the trapezoid, from the cone to the polyhedron. Every human expression, from anger to lasciviousness, every animal profile from the snout to the beak, from the jowl to the muzzle. Imagine all those grotesque heads carved on the Pont Neuf, those nightmares petrified under the hand of Germain Pilon suddenly coming to life and staring at you with flaming eyes. Or all the masks of the Carnival of Venice passing before you in succession. In short, a human kaleidoscope. Suddenly, there was a thunderous burst of applause, mingled with prodigious shouts of acclamation. The Pope of Fools had been elected. It was indeed a wondrous face which now appeared in the round window. After all those hexagonal, pentagonal, and heteroclite faces had passed in review without attaining the ideal of the grotesque which had been built up by the frenzied imagination of the crowd, nothing less than the sublimely monstrous face which now dazzled them could have obtained a unanimous vote of approval. Jacques Coppenol applauded himself. And Clopin Tréfoliu, who had presented himself as a candidate, and God knows the intensity of ugliness his face was capable of attaining, acknowledged his defeat. We shall do likewise, and not attempt to give the reader an idea of that tetrahedron nose, that horseshoe mouth, that small left eye half hidden by a bristly red eyebrow, while the right eye disappeared entirely behind an enormous wart. Those irregular teeth, jagged here and there like battlements of a fortress. That horny lip over which one of those teeth protruded like an elephant's tusk. That forked chin, and especially the expression spread over all of this. That expression of mingled malice, amazement, and sadness. Let the reader imagine it, if he can. The acclamation was unanimous. The crowd rushed into the chapel, and the new Pope of Fools was brought forth in triumph. But it was then that the surprise and admiration reached their height. What had been taken for a twisted grimace was actually his natural expression. In fact, his whole body might have been described as a twisted grimace. His huge head bristled with stiff red hair. Between his shoulders was an enormous hump which had a corresponding projection in front. His legs were so strangely made that they could touch only at the knees, like two sickles with their handles joined. His feet were immense, and his hands were monstrous. Yet, with all that deformity, there was a certain air of formidable vigor, agility, and courage. A strange exception to the classic rule that strength, like beauty, comes from harmony. The new Pope of Fools looked like a giant who had been broken into pieces and haphazardly put back together again. When this Cyclops-like creature appeared on the threshold of the chapel, motionless, squat, almost as broad as he was tall, and wearing a red and purple coat covered with little silver bells. The crowd recognized him and cried out, "It's Quasimodo, the bell ringer! Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame! One-eyed Quasimodo! Bow-legged Quasimodo! Hurrah! Hurrah!" It was obvious that the poor devil had a wide choice of nicknames. "Pregnant women had better look the other way," shouted the students. "And those who want to be pregnant too," chimed in Jahan. Many of the women present actually did cover their faces. "What an ugly ape!" exclaimed one. "He's as wicked as he is ugly," said another. "It must be the devil himself. I have the misfortune to live near Notre Dame. Every night I hear him prowling around on the roof. With the cats! He casts spells on us through the chimney. The other night he made a face at me through the window. It scared me half out of my wits. I'm sure he goes to the witches' Sabbaths. One night he left a broom on my roof. What a hideous hunchback." The men, on the other hand, were delighted and applauded enthusiastically. Quasimodo, the cause of all of the tumult, stood gloomy and grave in the doorway of the chapel and let himself be admired. A student came too close to him and laughed in his face. Without a word, Quasimodo seized him by the waist and threw him 10 feet into the crowd. Jacques Campanole came up to him, full of wonder. "By God!" he exclaimed. "You've got the finest ugliness I've ever seen in my life, Holy Father. You deserve to be elected Pope in Rome as well as Paris." He clapped him heavily on the shoulder as he said this. Quasimodo remained motionless. Campanole went on. "Now here's a fellow I'd like to go carousing with some night." Quasimodo did not answer. "What's the matter with you? Are you deaf?" asked the Hossier. He actually was deaf, and he was beginning to be annoyed at the way Campanole was acting with him. He suddenly turned on him with such a formidable snarl that the Flemish ambassador shrank back in surprise and fear. A circle of terror and respect at least 15 feet in radius was instantly formed around the strange personage. An old woman explained to Campanole that Quasimodo was deaf. "Deaf too," cried the Hossier with his lusty Flemish laugh. "He's as fine a pope as anyone could ask for, by God!" "I know him," said Jahan, who had climbed down from the top of his pillar in order to get a closer look at Quasimodo. "He's the bell ringer for my brother, the archdeacon. Hello, Quasimodo." "He can talk when he wants to," remarked the old woman. "He became deaf from the bells, but he's not dumb." Meanwhile, a group of beggars, lackeys, pickpockets, and students had brought up the cardboard tiara and the mock robe of the Pope of Fools. Quasimodo let himself be decked out in them with a kind of proud docility. He was then made to sit down on a brightly colored litter. 12 officers of the Brotherhood of Fools lifted it to their shoulders. A bitter and haughty joy spread over the gloomy face of the Cyclops as he saw under his deformed feet the heads of all those handsome, straight, and well-made men. Then the ragged, screaming proclamation began to move, preparing to make the customary tour of the inside galleries of the Palace of Justice before parading through the streets.